As far as I'm concerned, as long as that same respect and recognition is not shown toward every one of our people in this country, it doesn't exist for me. And during the few moments that we have left, we want to have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Today, we are speaking about truly an issue that's been on my mind quite a bit, actually. And that is the affair of what we know as the black middle class. I think sometimes people get caught up, or maybe they seem to view class as this kind of mystified, nebulous group. And as Kwame Nkrumah quite accurately defined, class is merely a group of individuals who share the same material interest. And I think that working definition is interest is important for us when we speak about class and material interest and material analysis. Joining me today, I have my dear brother, Nkazi, all the way from South Africa. How are you, my brother?
I'm good, my brother. It's good to hear from you.
No, thank you. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me. So straight away, we're going to talk about, for those who didn't see, me and Kaz did a very, very interesting live about the situation in South Africa now. That can be found on my Instagram at The Gambian. And kind of not a continuation, but a topic that we spoke about was the issue of class, was the black middle class. So how do you see the black middle class playing out in South Africa?
Before I go on, I just wanted to do a little tradition we do here in South Africa before we start anything, yeah?
Okay.
It just will take 2 seconds, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like, in Nigeria, the Igbos, they break a coconut before they talk. In South Africa, the Zulus, we say Sawubona. So you can
Sawubona.
Sawubona.
Okay.
That means I see you. I recognize you in the spirit in this realm that we are in. I can see you. And you repeat back to me, say Sawubona.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's do that.
Sawubona. That was quite important, because it quite touched on the topic that we're talking about today, about the black middle class, or the so-called black middle class. And it's very interesting how, through my talks and conversations with you, that me here all the way in South Africa and you there all the way in the UK and someone probably in America is dealing with the same issue. And that means that the problem, or the cause rather, is the same. So for me, biggest observation, or my biggest contention rather, with this so-called idea of a black middle class is that is this question of identity crisis.
Yes.
And it's interesting because I'm speaking to you, and where I'm from, I'm probably considered a black middle class on the basis of that I'm college educated, or where I live, or even the fact that I'm talking to you right now. My access to information, my access to technology, my access to certain privileges which are not really commonly found by the majority working class in South Africa.
Yes.
So they would consider that would basically then by virtue of that, I would be considered a black middle class.
Yes.
But it's my interest, or rather the interesting part of that is that it seemingly seems like this idea of class is formed on the basis of your proximity to whiteness, right?
Interesting.
Because obviously now, these very same things I'm telling you about are all kind of considered Western civilization. So college education, where you live in a suburb or an environment where it's mostly white neighborhood, you went to a white majority school, you speak the language, you speak the culture, you even the accent plays a role.
And I think it's very interesting when we speak about it from the South African perspective, and even if we expand it further, South African perspective because of apartheid, but also if we expand it further to to colonialism across the continent, wasn't that the pattern? Isn't this what Frantz Fanon speaks about when we train the native bourgeoisie to then become the new colonizers?
Yeah, in his book, The Black Skin, White Mask, he he definitely he touches on that. He speaks about that and saying that the bourgeoisie becomes the new colonizers, and
Yeah.
it's supposed to be that way.
Of course.
You
Of
know.
course. And this is why I'll be honest with you,
Mm,
me and you, we love black people, of course.
mm,
But this is why I get a bit upset with a race only politics.
mm,
Because a race only politics mystifies who's on your side.
mm,
Because immediately you see a black person, and because of this race solidarity you want to have with this black person, you feel like it's incumbent upon you to support this black person.
mm,
But then when you have a material analysis, it easily dispels, nope, this person is not on my side.
mm,
This person is all too happy to serve the interests of the white elite.
mm,
This person is all too interested to play the role of the native bourgeoisie.
mm.
So I think it's very important. That's why I always say, inject me with a race politic that's infused with a material and class politics. But yeah, carry on, sorry.
But even that on its own, it's quite an interesting thing because my fascination is always pre-colonization.
Mm-hmm.
How did we exist in Africa? What sort of social contracts we had as different people
Mm-hmm.
from different
Mm.
tribes, from different environments? Because obviously not everyone had a farm with cows, and you understand.
Yeah,
It had some form of class,
of course.
and you see it in the different practices. They'll tell you that when certain scarifications are on the face, means this person belonged in the social rank, whereas this person maybe belonged in a lower rank or higher rank or top rank or a royalty. But
Yes.
and I'm always interested in how they behave then, and how much of that was then influenced or changed when colonization came about. And for me, I think what it did is that with colonization, it gave us a goal that success is white, and anyone
Mm-hmm.
close to it is civilized. Anyone
Yes.
further away from it is uncivilized. So
Yeah.
with black people, we all start on the ground, uncivilized.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
understand? And then there are those who have to be given certain access or limited access and opportunities. Do you understand? Who then become the what you call the bourgeoisie. And then the bourgeoisie, because now this is a system. It's a
Yeah.
system. So
Mm-hmm.
there is no way, you can exist in it and not portray the behavior of the ones who created it,
Of course.
whether you like it or not. You
Of
know,
course.
you wanna have a garden boy or domestic work. You wanna have to learn about French Revolution, and you have to discard your own history, your own culture, your own background, who you are, how you talk, how you communicate, how you think. How you spiritually express yourself. It has to be completely different because you're in the system and you have to exist in it.
Absolutely, but not even about. Just addition to that, though, I would say it's very interesting. I mean, you mentioned pre-colonial Africa.
Hmm.
Sekou Touré, the president of Guinea, he makes a very important point. He says that there's a difference between social difference
Hmm.
or differentiation
Hmm.
and class.
Hmm.
Because we have no issue recognizing difference. Of course, I mean, not every person is going to be the same.
That's true.
However, we know in pre-colonial Africa, this is not to paint it out as a utopia. Those
Mm.
discussions are immature discussions. No place is perfect. But
Hmm.
what we do see is there was at least a different way of existing amongst in society.
Mm.
What we call communalism.
Mm. That's true.
Communalism being that, yes, okay, I might not have a farm or I might not
Mm.
have this skill. However, we collectively pool our resources, we collectively pool our skills for who though? For the benefit of the community.
That's very true. In fact, in Zulu culture, right, we have this practice called ubusisa.
Mm,
Azibuyele emuva emasisweni. What basically, what used to happen is that a family would have cattle, and the other
yeah.
family would have cattle, and the other one have cattle, and the one obviously now they breed, right? And then
Yes.
when these ones breed, now here's Momodu and Nkazi, and let's say James, right?
Yes.
James is a young man who's trying to establish his family. What would happen
Mm-hmm.
is that myself and you, from our cows, we would give him, maybe I give him 6, you give him 6, and then he has 12. And then my cows and yours, they breed, and then he nurtures and take care of them. They breed and they produce, and the cattle that comes from there become his. And then he sends back mine 6, gives you back your 6, and now he has his own. You understand? So basically, what I'm trying to say is that to like you perfectly explain it that way. Is that we have a communalism,
Yes.
type of what we call ubuntu, saying umuntu
Ubuntu.
yes, umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu, meaning I am because you are. We are connected, and I think the biggest issue, or the fundamental issue with the class system, is that it avoids a biggest factor, which is the spiritual aspect.
Exactly.
Everything is material.
Yeah.
So everything's
that's very interesting, because that is the critique in many ways of, let's say, Cedric Robinson, who he wrote Black Marxism, and that is the critique of sometimes traditional Marxists. They say that they only concentrate on the material. And Sekou Touré and other Pan-African leaders constantly spoke about the need for the room for culture in our struggle. And the part, we have people, again, Africans have a way of life. That's not to homogenize every single African, but as you're right, Africans have some traditional religions. Some of them have embraced Islam. Some of them have, and what does that mean? That means that they have different understandings of what it means to be a human being, first and foremost, and they have different understandings of how history is moved forward, and what are the motivations for some people in that history. And I think, again, it's very important that we don't neglect that as Africans. But however, at the same time, I fully hear you, Nkazi, but my question to you then is, I understand all of that, and that should be cultivated.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and this is not to say I recognize racism has an effect psychologically.
Yeah.
I recognize the need for psychoanalysis of how race plays out.
Yeah.
But one thing, I don't know, maybe because I see it in front of me and you probably see it more drastically than I, but we see people starving every single day.
100%.
And because you see people starving, you can imagine I find it very difficult to have other conversations. I'm like, nope, I have to get people fed. What can we do to get people fed? What can we do that will increase the material conditions of feeding people? So that always for me comes at the forefront. That's why I focus on the material. I don't know what you think of that.
In South Africa, this kind of plays out very interestingly, because what you find is when you look at this idea of utilitarianism, is the majority must be happy, then we're all happy. Here in South Africa, our understanding of wealth, and by our I mean the majority, people are very much cultivated in their culture and in the way of life of how they used to live. It's completely different from those who then accept the Western way of living. Because when you then participate in capitalism, then of course, then by virtue of the fact that I have a humble home, I have maybe one source of income for the whole family, you would look at me and say, we're starving. These are the indigenous and the poor. But they don't see it that way.
Oh, okay.
You understand? They don't see themselves that way. You understand? How it goes back to that idea of communalism. Communism is that spirit of communism, meaning as long as we're all okay, then we are okay. As different from this idea of, okay, but this household needs to live like this, and that household needs to live like that, and this particular household needs to have this certain standard of living for which then creates this competitiveness, which is what capitalism really is. It's a survival of the fittest. Is dog eats dog. The one at the top of the food chain and the one at the bottom is different.
Yeah, for real. But then I hear that, and I think that's very important. Thank you for that perspective. My only kind of addition to that or comment was, how do we then incorporate, like, okay, we know people might be satisfied, people might have a different outlook as to what is considered wealth and what is considered their material interest being satisfied, but also notwithstanding that, we could improve the situation drastically
Mm.
if we stop the exploitation of people and resources from those who are capitalists. Do you know what I mean? To
You
those
know,
who are imperial.
you're absolutely right, and that is not one of my biggest issue with NGOs, and I see them a lot in Europe, even
Mhm.
especially in the I'm sorry to say in the Muslim space,
Yep.
where you have this thing from people from Europe or America, which I mean it's a good intention, God must reward them for their intention, but you have this idea where you come to a community, they have a certain way of living, you come with your standard, you want to impose it, you know these people need this certain thing. We want to build this certain thing and that, and then you disturb the way of living that they have already created. Right? Like
Hmm.
you basically come having solutions, not rather asking the community, what is it that you need?
True.
Do you understand? So the community, because so the community has been living 100 of years before you came, or you realize there's a problem. Even 100 years after that, they will continue to live. Even when you create that solution that you have, we have to build an orphanage, or we have to build this. It's good, but in engaging the community, did you find out that this is what they need? Is this what they is this what they want? Because when you engage the community, you will then realize that there is a certain different way or standard of living that then requires tailor-made solutions for exactly that.
Okay.
You
No, I
know?
think that's very important. Absolutely. I think
Mm,
people who, and I think this, thank you for saying that. I think you living on the continent, even though I've lived in North Africa for the
mm,
past coming up 5 years, I think it's very important that those, and particularly those in the diaspora,
mm,
particularly those who are African in the
mm.
diaspora, that they do not become or embody what we know commonly as that white savior mentality.
Yeah.
We can't go back to the continent and thinking we're going to fix everything and fix everybody.
And
You know,
sorry to cut you. You know why I say that point is very important, right? It's important because it goes back to the actual topic that we're discussing. We have
hmm
a certain measure of success that we have, that people, in order for us to say people are happy or they're fed or they're taken care of or they're living a good human life, they have to live the in accordance to the standard that we have. So if you don't have Wi-Fi or if you don't have running water, like a tap basically, or if you don't
hmm
have this and tables or school chairs or whatever the case is, then in accordance to how we live in Europe, you are not living a good life, or you are basically poor, right? But areas are different. Yes, in the UK, maybe schools and all of that will be fundamentally important, but maybe when you come here in what you would know, a place where you're known as a rural or village, there it's more agricultural based, it's more, cultural, communal based, as I said,
Yeah.
So fundamentally, if you want to solve their problems, because we cannot deny the effect that capitalism, racism, apartheid, and communism had, even to extent of the villages, of taking away the resources, exploiting
hmm
the resources. But if you want to create solutions there, you need to provide tailor-made solutions for what they need, the skills they need. What skills you need here,
That's
you
true.
what,
That's true.
and then you
But
provide
having
that.
said that,
Hmm.
yeah, but having said that at the same time, I think most, if you think of Pan African leaders
Mm,
who were like Marxists and stuff, they took into consideration that because they said, we are talking about agrarian societies. We're
mm,
not talking about industrial societies. And
mm,
obviously, the solution in agrarian societies is obviously going to be in accordance to the place in which they find themselves in.
mm.
So I think it's very important. But again, I do want to ask the question again: how do we have the conversation though? Where should we not? Do you not agree with then organizing against the exploitation of resources by the capitalists?
No, no, it is. That's fun. That's why I'm saying that is important. And this is a conversation I always have with people, right? It's like, for instance, if you have an Indian friend, right?
Yeah.
And an Indian friend who wants to show you that he's not racist. He's going to come to you, Mamadou, and your friends and your black friends, chill with you guys and all of that, and tell you that he can show you that he's not racist. Trying to change your perspective of that, of Indian racism by chilling with you. It's okay, but it's wrong. He needs to go to the Indian community.
Mm.
You understand? Engage the Indian community on their racism rather than trying to convince you. So
Mm-hmm.
the same way, we in our spaces, if you are in the UK, and I'm in America, whatever the case is, and
True.
there's an Apple or a company which is exploiting Congo, you know, I have to deal with Apple there. I'm not gonna go back in Congo and try and, I have to deal with Apple there on the basis of the resources and the means that are available to me. So if
Absolutely,
I
I
need to
agree.
boycott it, or I need to start a voice, whatever the case is, you do that. And more importantly, you force your government. So if you have an embassy, you have a UK embassy in Congo, you force the
Yeah,
embassy that you push the embassy, you force the embassy to engage with government to change policies that will allow people to actually
absolutely.
benefit from the resources, that the natural resources that are theirs. Because Africa, as a continent, is feeding the whole world in terms of
Mm. For real?
natural resource.
Yep.
Yeah, you understand? The whole world is relying on Africa in terms of
Except
natural resources,
Africans.
except for Africans. Do you
No,
understand?
you're absolutely right. And I think it's like right now we're speaking, with the protests taking place against the revolution in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I'm telling people, if you are living in the West and you're asking what can I do? What can I do?
Yeah.
First and foremost, you shouldn't be supporting any imperial actions, first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, the thing you can do is calling upon your government to end
Mm-hmm.
the vicious blockade of Cuba, the
Yes.
embargo. That's what
Yes.
you should be doing. So I
100.
do see your analogy here.
Yes.
I do see your analogy here. And
Mm.
also, obviously, as well, we always can amplify and support voices on the ground there.
100.
We've spoken about so much things, but let's go back into the black and middle class. I think you said to me, in order to understand how the black middle class emerged today, we have to take it back to, is it post apartheid, you said, or during
Yes.
apartheid?
Post apartheid. So
Please give us the history lesson.
so in South Africa, and funny enough, I need to say this before as a disclosure, or as a preamble, is that this thing is the same everywhere in America, in the
Yeah.
UK, it's the same. Here in South Africa, basically what happened is basically colonization happened, and in 1652 the white people arrived.
Hmm.
1652 they arrived and they established. In fact, it's funny. It's a company called the Dutch VOC. It's a Dutch. They basically wanted to establish a cooling off area for when they trade, so the ships can rest. They wanted a rest area, and then
Okay.
they saw that, okay, the Cape is actually a rest area when you travel from Asia into to Europe, which is why
Okay.
there is an argument actually that the globe, or what the map of the world as we see it, is a lie. Africa is not really at the bottom; it's on top. But
Hmm.
anyway, that's another conversation. So they wanted a resting, so they created this resting area. When they created this resting area, they realized that, oh, there's this place, which was inhabited by people who are in the Cape, was the Khoisans.
Okay.
Right, and then they came and engaged and colonized and declared it their land and stole land and went up north and came to KZN, and they met the Zulus and they met the Xhosas in the east, and they met the Venda and the Tsonga there on top. So, missionaries came, all this, the whole story of how colonization go in all the different countries in Africa. But now, interesting enough, then there was what you call the Anglo-Boer War, which basically was a war between the British and the Afrikaner. The Afrikaner are
Okay.
from the Dutch, are from the Netherlands. They from
Okay.
the Netherlands. They came here in South Africa, and they were also under what you call British colonization, and that's what they say. But they were other also colonizers. They came and they fought for the land of Africa, of South Africa, which
Okay.
was the Anglo-Boer War, and then the British and the Afrikaner had an agreement, and then they formed what you know as the Union of South Africa, saying, okay, we're going to divide this part. You're going to take that part. You're going to take that part. No one of indigenous people from this land was involved in the conversation. And
Oh wow.
then from there, what we now know about apartheid was in 1948 established. as basically a system imposed by the Afrikaner against,
Okay.
the native people, the indigenous people of this country. And then they had the ANC was formed, and other political parties was formed, and they had negotiations with Nelson Mandela and his team, and then they agreed, which was what 92, 94, Codesa. They agreed that, okay, we're going to give you political freedom where you're allowed to vote. It's very important to note that while this was happening globally, there was a boycott, so they felt the economic pressure that, okay, now people, we're no longer making money, so apartheid is no longer economically it doesn't make sense financially. So we actually
Mhm.
need to give them some rights.
Can I just put something in there?
Mm-hmm.
It's so interesting that you know people like to. I mean, people. I'm sure my listeners will never buy into the nonsense propaganda that somehow the West acts benevolently, or somehow the West acts with the interest of humanity or of humanitarian causes. I know that's not the case, but as you just said right there, even the abolishment of slavery was really because they had industrialized their countries and they had no longer had the need for the labor in which they had in how they were accumulating or extracting wealth from the slavery or from the slave labor. So it was never to do with morals. It's just to do, okay, it doesn't make sense financially anymore.
This you absolutely.
And it says to me time and time again, if we are going to get a radical transformation or radical change, we have to agitate the pockets of those who own the corporations.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's just my. But carry on, please.
Exactly. You understand? So they realized no longer makes sense financially to impose this apartheid. So they went into negotiations, and they negotiated they're going to allow your political freedom. The political freedom basically means you're allowed to vote, you're allowed to sit in government. Now, their biggest issue was, how do we transition, right? How do you move from, because they didn't consider this. I mean, you must understand the black people who were sitting on the table negotiating with them were people who were already products of the second class education, second class. You
Oh, the
understand?
plot thickens. Yes.
So we're like, but how are these people going to run these institutions? How are you going to run the mines? How are you going to run government? How are you going to be able to control this thing? So
Hmm.
they had what you call the sunset clauses, and the sunset clauses was basically saying, okay, we understand that we're gonna elect you, Mandela's gonna be president, fine, but in the key offices or the key areas or the key departments, which is your mining, which was your agriculture, which is your financial, or is it which known as the treasury. We're gonna keep our people, even the security, which is the police and the army. We're gonna keep our people, and we are also going to do shared skills. So we're gonna teach you guys.
Hmm.
We're gonna teach you for the first year. So from 94 to 98, because I mean, your presidency lasts for 4 years, right?
Yeah.
A term lasts for 4 years. So we're going to teach you the skills and all of that, and you are able to have access to all of this thing. Fine, that happened, and then, like I said in our live yesterday, then the TRC happened, which was
Yeah.
the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Everyone came, sat down. This one said, "This is what I did. I'm sorry. Forgive me." People forgave. They gave them money. They left, and this one felt free. Nothing happened. No prosecution. Nothing. People went back to live in the very same neighborhood and very same structures that they created, which was another condition of the negotiation, that people, you don't take anything away from white
But
people.
who's negotiating, bro? Like, okay, you got Mandela and who?
It's the ANC. It's the
So the ANC is negotiating on behalf of the country,
yes,
and they're
of the
negotiating with the ex-administrators of the colonial
and
regime
the National Party. And
and
here's
National Party.
and the key people that people keep avoiding, who are actually on the table discussing the whole of this, was the corporate.
Mm.
Your banks were sitting there, your mines were sitting there, your ex state owned enterprises, they were all sitting there, and they were having this
Wow.
conversation. And now, so they were involved, even in the drafting of the constitution, they were involved. And Section 25, which is a very key, complicated section in South Africa, in Section 25 of the constitution, South Africa says all land may be expropriated with compensation, right? And people didn't agree to this, but the ANC conceded to this, and the issue was the compensation part. That how,
Meaning that, okay,
yeah,
yeah, so the land will be taken away from the white people, but they will be paid for, they'll be
100%.
compensated.
They'll be compensated.
Nonsense.
They'll be compensated, and more especially, it won't just be done tomorrow. So there must be a period. There must be, acts that are passed, the Land Act, and all of this type of things that are passed to allow this to happen. So it must take, could take quite a while. But and then the white people raised the issue that but we saw it happen in Zimbabwe. The people came, they took the land, and they didn't know how to run it. We saw it happening in Uganda, where Idi Amin kicked out the Indians, and the people got the jobs, and the economy crashed. They don't know how to run these things. They don't know, and that was the issue that white people had. That they don't know, they'll farm or fail, which I disagree with. If you look at the labor, because anything is the labor. Do you
Of
understand? Who
course.
does the labor? A company is the labor, farmers the labor, who handles the cattle, the everything, who the production. The only reason Zimbabwe crashed, the only reason Uganda crashed was because US sanctioned them. Britain
Hmm.
sanctioned. And anyone who wanted to trade with them was threatened. Don't trade with them or else we're going to sanction you too. And that's why they failed. It failed. So the same situation was going to happen in South Africa, and they didn't want that. So then that happened, then Thabo Mbeki becomes president. When
Hmm.
Thabo Mbeki becomes president, he creates what we call, his legacy is what we call the black middle class, or the clever blacks as we call them, because now
Okay.
black people were now allowed to buy property in white neighborhoods, to send their school in X models in white neighborhoods, white
Hmm.
schools. They're allowed to engage or basically be members and community members of these white neighborhoods, white areas, right? Now, obviously, the biggest factor that is avoided here is there wasn't any psychological or mental decolonization that was done.
Okay.
So these are people coming in looking at white people as the holy saviors or wanting to be like them.
Hmm.
And so already mentally, you believe the white person is better than you, mentally. And structurally, so the entire structure is not decolonized. The schools still teach everything from a Western perspective. It's white
Hmm.
people's history, it's white people's accounting, economics, etc. Even the language, you're not allowed to speak your own native language in the schools, you know. But because now these were concessions that were made, at the time. No one really saw it as a problem because I mean, hey, we here, we integrating, we kumbaya, we're holding hands. Do you understand? And the little
Yeah.
bit of access that they gave you. And the biggest thing is that black people, and this is my separation of what separates a black person from being a middle class and being a working class in South Africa. Black
Hmm.
people had access to credit.
Okay.
You could
Yeah.
now go to the bank and
Get a
loan
loan.
and get a loan for a car. You could go to the bank, get a loan for an apartment or got a bond. You could have access to it. Before you couldn't, but now you can. So what does this all symbolize? You're given a facade of
Okay.
progression. You understand? Now you think you're better, and now you think you've made it in life. You're successful, but by virtue of nature playing it out, you realize that I am not. I have to lose myself, completely lose who I am to be able to fit in to these spaces because none of these spaces were decolonized.
Hmm.
You understand? So now, then what happened is that there becomes because now you have friends, you have white friends. Now you have white dream. You want to wear your white girl. You want to change your hair. You want to burn your hair and relax it. You want to talk in a certain way. You want to change your name. You don't want to be Momo. You want to be known as Mo because it's easier on white people's tongues. You want to go to Greece and Italy and France. You want to eat in white places. You look at black people from your own families who live in the township. You look at them as lesser than you because they
Wow.
they are not white enough. They don't speak, and so here we call them coconuts. So black on the on the
Yeah.
outside, white on the inside. There's nothing fundamentally black about you anymore other than the fact that you have a skin color. And that is now, they then have their own politics.
Okay.
You understand? Which then leads to them facing an identity crisis. Why are their politics? Their politics is that white people will always remind you that you're black.
For real though. For real.
They will always remind you that you. We've seen it with even of Obama. President Obama. You understand? What is the first thing Trump did when he ran for president of Obama is not from here.
Yeah.
He questioned his citizenship.
His citizenship and where he was born.
Do you understand? And then now he's trying to associate him with people who are criminals and all. So you'll always be reminded that you are black.
And it's interesting because you said a couple minutes ago, or 10 minutes ago, that when it comes to this class of people, they have that identity crisis a lot of the time because they don't know. They know, like, no matter how far you excel in white institutions, no matter how many friends you have, no matter how well you do, you will always be reminded that you are still a Negro.
You will.
You will always be reminded, and then now you have that internal crisis.
Yeah.
Am I, where do I belong? Do I fight on the streets with people who look like me, but really and truly I feel like they're less than me?
Yeah.
Or do I, struggle to fit in, knowing that no matter what, I won't fit in? And I think it's but this is what I'm saying though. That black middle class, I think we can look at them now and think, oh, these people are like this, but it is the system that engineers the creation of those people.
Yes.
Because the system needs to have a few people let through to say, look at progress.
Yes.
To say, look, okay. And then it reinforces the kind of pathologizing of black people are just lazy. Look, he can make it. Why didn't you make it?
Yes.
And as well, I think people need to understand, it's like, the only time, not the only time, but history has shown us time and time again, when you agitate the pockets of those who own stuff, things get changed. So what you have in the 60s in America is what is known as the era of Black Rebellion. Black Rebellion, what happened? They were burning down shops, they were looting, they were rioting, and the white corporatists and capitalists said, no, we can't have this. They're messing up our money now. And then you have two options now. The American government could have went out and slaughtered people. And don't get me wrong, they killed many black revolutionaries and infiltrated many black power groups and brought them down. But at the same time, they can't be seen to do that to their own people. So what they're going to say is, okay, fine. We will let now some people into our system.
Yes.
And those people we will train them. They will think like us. They will be like us, and they will believe in the system. So now they will do the work for us. They do. And this is what I'm trying to say. This is why I don't like using the word racism as much and I prefer white supremacy. Because it confuses it. Because we can't call the black middle class racist, but we can call them embodiments or people that manifest white supremacy. Absolutely.
Here in South Africa, we say they need exorcism because
a
jinn, when your jinn has taken over. And there needs to be some ayats needs to be recited there. That's what was happening. And what then happens is what I call domestic violence, because domestic violence, we always it's in the household. I mean, they're still black, so they're in the household with us black people. Now, the fact that they are not being allowed completely in the white space frustrates them. And you know who they take it out on? Us. Then they come back to us. And then they look at us, and try to be even more brutal than even white people, like beyond. Just so the master can say, you see this one? Yeah, no. This one is part of us, because why? Fundamentally, they hate themselves. Self-hate. It's self-hate.
It's true. It's true. And I think that's why you mentioned that it's not just material. There's a spiritual aspect. There's a psychological aspect that also has to be dealt with.
I have a question for you.
Please, but I also have a question for you. But you go ahead first.
My question is, because here in South Africa, at least here, like race, as problematic as it is, it's clear. There's blacks, there's colors, there's Indians, there's white. There, I always struggle, and I always see people say this, but I struggle, and I wonder how you deal with it. This term POC,
Yes.
you know, because it seems like it's kumbaya, like ticks everyone is not white.
No, I'll be honest with you. I don't like the term because so POC is more American, and we use BAME. So we use the acronym BAME in the UK, and that stands for Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, I don't like the bureaucratic language because first and foremost, it wasn't given to us. I mean, we didn't come up with it ourselves. The government gave it to us. It's almost like this catch-all phrase for non-white.
Okay.
And what it does, it collapses the very real, sort of the experiences that different communities faces. However, what I won't do though, and this is maybe we might disagree, or might have more material analysis or material approach. I won't fight over wording.
Yeah.
I won't fight over labels.
Yeah.
What I will fight over is what are the material conditions of Black people in this UK, and how can we improve them? And naturally, there's going to be an overlap. So, for example, we have Black African, Black Caribbean. Often, in many aspects, they're the same in many things, and in many things, and sometimes they differ. Not in only slight things. Yeah. Many times you might have the material interest of Black people or African people or Caribbean people more in line with, say, example, someone from the Bangladeshi community. And then amongst the Asian community, you have the Indians do better than everyone else.
Yes.
So that's why I say, like, yes, race, we have a race thing, but also that a race cannot be divorced from a class analysis, personally.
That's very true. And that's why I asked you that, because I feel like when you collectively put all of these different people with different experiences in one box, you kind of silence the one at the very least, which are the Black people, because now we must celebrate the success of the Indian community, because now they're part of BAME. If they are given opportunities, they're given access, it must be celebrated by everyone. But we know that struggle, that interpersonal struggle, intrapersonal struggles between these very two communities.
Exactly. And that's why I always say then, as long as we have a material structural analysis with the race analysis, I'm okay. But then, my brother, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
The opposite is also true, bro, because it confuses now. I won't celebrate. Let's say we have a woman, and I mentioned her so many times. She is, I believe, the culture secretary in a right-wing government. Yeah. This is a Black lady, bro. She's a Black lady. And now, because people have a race-first politic, they feel like we have to celebrate her success. Why would I celebrate the success of a Black person who is instituting policies that are against Black people?
No, you
see what I mean?
You're 100%.
Likewise, in America, why would I celebrate the success of Kamala Harris, the vice president of the UK, when she is the vice president of an empire that is responsible for the killings of so many Black people? So that's my point. You see what I mean? So when we have that structural analysis, it allows you to ask the important questions, and you can delineate, okay, cool, this is the people that we can support and should be supporting, and this is where our work should be, and this is where our work shouldn't be. Because I'm telling you, if the only solution we're giving for Black people is you can now become like the middle class white people, now that's no solution. That's no solution.
That's at all. And that is the issue with the Black middle class, because they become that. They become the gatekeepers.
Exactly.
Of
progress and success.
Yes, of progress and success. That, what are you complaining about? Here you are. Here's a Kamala Harris, here's a Barack Obama.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter that his entire government is white, but he's Black.
Exactly. And that's why I kind of fear a lot. Not a fear, but I just try to move away from I won't say race first, because just as much as I disagree with a race-only politic, I also disagree with a class-only politic as well. Because race does have a function. You know what I mean? So I feel like the strongest politics for me at the moment, where I am, is a kind of combination of the two.
There's I don't know, you probably read it, I don't know, but if you haven't read it, I'll send it to you. There's a book by a man called Steve Biko called I Write What I Like.
Okay.
And Steve Biko, he was he started the Black Conscious movement in the 70s, because Biko came and said, I see all these political parties that are pushing for this and that, but we as Black people are not really ready to even get any form of freedom until we deal with the actual fundamental psychological, spiritual colonization that we underwent, because by the time we integrate with white people, if we haven't done this work, if we haven't conscientized ourselves, if we haven't taught ourselves to love ourselves, we are going to get into those spaces and we won't be ready to deal with someone who's had been fed white pride for 400 years, where you consider yourself as inferior and they consider themselves as superior. So in this book, he writes, says being black is beyond pigment of your skin. Being black is it's a mental decision, a psychological decision, a spiritual one, where you accept that this is who I am. And in this time, it was a revolution. So where you accept that I, as a black person, am on my own. Once you understand that you are on your own, like you are not with anyone, no white person, no one is for you other than yourself, then you will look after for you. You create solutions for yourself.
I hear that, and I feel like at the same time we can do. They're not for me. I don't see them. You do one thing or the other personally, and I feel like as well. Ultimately, when we're talking about struggle, everyone's role is different. And I think not everyone can do everything.
Yeah.
So, for example, I would never. I think it's very important, and I know in a world which teaches people like black people to hate themselves, absolutely, it's important that this belongs in the world of therapy. People, we need collective therapy.
Yes.
We need collective consciousness therapy and healing. Absolutely. Yeah. And those things are what it means to build a healthy community.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, as when we're building healthy communities in the spiritual aspects, I just feel like the material aspects of the people are starving. And I feel like that needs to be fixed as well.
100%.
We can talk forever, bro. I'm just because of the length of my podcast, I keep them this short. No this has been an amazing conversation, man. But bro, I have to have you on again in the future.
Yeah.
Nkazi, you're a friend and a brother, man. I love being in dialogue with you.
Always,
people hit up Nkazi on Instagram. I'll leave his Instagram in the description of this episode. Please like, comment, subscribe, The Malcolm Effect, and share it with your friends. Until next time, peace out.
Salam.